A German doctor sails off on a peaceful, solitary adventure only to come across a boat filled with desperate African refugees. A taut moral thriller, Styx, is a story of what happens when self-reliance runs into other people's desperation. The lives of others don't seem of much concern to a German doctor, Reich Suzanne Wolf, when she sets off on her adventure. Alone on a 30-foot sailing yacht, she is headed to Ascension Island, a mid-Atlantic speck roughly halfway between Africa and South America. With grit, provisions and a pretty coffee table book about the island that suggests her romanticism, or perhaps naivete, Reich is following Charles Darwin to Ascension. It's a dream journey that will slam into the refugee crisis. One woman's dream can look like someone else's worst nightmare, even if the director Wolfgang Fischer initially makes Reich's passage into existential isolation seem inviting. After a brief, eloquent preamble in Germany, he deposits Reich in Gibraltar, where she efficiently packs up her boat. Much like his protagonist, Fischer assumes a well-organized, seamless approach to his launch, setting the scene with a bright, direct visual style that feels largely informational, a lingering shot of what appears to be months' worth of food and water, and only occasionally slides into the metaphoric, as when Reich sails past a gargantuan tanker that conveys an ominous dehumanization. Part of the allure of this expedition is its quietude, at least for the audience. Soon after Reich leaves Gibraltar, she is enveloped by the ocean, and the movie shifts into the visual and auditory minimalism that defines its alluring, almost hypnotically soothing first third. Fischer primarily shot Styx on the open sea, with Malta standing in for the west coast of Africa. It's a headily seductive landscape painted in every conceivable shade of blue and daubed with white. Like Reich, you settle into the luxurious peacefulness, a stillness augmented by the water's rhythmic splashes, her bustling movements and the boat's gentle cacophony, the flap of the sails, the whir of the winch, assorted pleasant creaks. Excursions into solitude invariably must end, especially when there's another hour or so of movie yet to come. Civilization intrudes on Reich's seclusion when a man's voice begins squawking on her radio. It's a friendly, ever so slightly paternalistic intrusion. He provides an extreme weather forecast and promises future help if she should ever need it. A no-nonsense woman who seems perfectly capable of taking care of herself, Reich politely accepts the offer. Still, there's something about the exchange that seems to irk her and you, partly because the movie is playing with the figure of the independent modern woman, one who seems capable of handling any reasonable challenge. The violent storm that soon descends precedes a dramatic narrative shift. After the weather clears, Reich sees a fishing trawler overloaded with passengers, there between Cape Verde and Mauritania, because the camera continues to share her point of view, and the trawler is distant enough, you hear voices but can't make out faces, just bodies and frantically waving arms. Reich sends out a distress signal. Her boat is too small to save all the passengers, who she worries will panic and scramble on board, sinking it. One voice after another answers back, a clamor of international strangers who sternly tell her to do nothing and wait for help. Reich waits and waits some more. In short order, the larger world crashes in, and a story of radical, deeply privileged individualism gives way to a potent, messy and sometimes uncomfortable parable about what human beings owe one another. The refugees are adrift on a sea of global indifference. Fischer puts a human face on the crisis through the introduction of a boy in his early teens, Gideon Aduor Wesika, who swims to Reich's boat, almost drowning. Pulling him out of the water, Reich calls him Kingsley, the name on his bracelet, and they begin a wary relationship that movingly if schematically personalizes a larger social struggle. Fischer's minimalism isn't simply a stylistic choice, it's also strategic. The story of an advantaged European face-to-face with desperately imperiled African refugees seems tailor-made for political pieties and the dubious enshrinement of one more white savior story. For the longest time, though, Fischer, working with a script that he wrote with Ika Kunzel, refuses to preach or tip his political hand. Instead he focuses on the physical dangers and bodily assaults that Kingsley and Reich endure as the voices on the radio continue promising help and the voices from the boat eerily begin to dim. Reich's stoic competence and Wolf's attractive, contained performance have led you to think that she can handle anything, a fantasy that is as reassuring as it is grimly, horrifically false.